So, I just got nominated for an Eisner. What? Hi, I'm Jeremy, I'm a writer, and I make videos about all things imaginary. Last week, I made a video in a series about my creative journey that was about my first published piece of creative writing, which has just come out. And at that time, in that video, I also talked about how even though it was my first published piece of writing, it wasn't really my first time being published. There had been a few exceptions, and most notably, a lot of the work that I do as a translator, through which I'd been published quite a bit. This is my first published work, in a sense. I've been published before. I work as a translator, translating comic books from French to English, and actually get to do a lot of translation with Lionforge, which is kind of what led to me working on this. It turns out that last week, as that video was going online, the Eisner nominations came out. And a friend of mine messaged me before I even found out about it to tell me, hey, congratulations on an Eisner nomination that I wasn't even aware of at all. So, of course, I raced online, I wanted to go check out the nominations, and it turns out that I was actually nominated for my work on this book, Heracles. This is a really cool French comic, and it got nominated for Best U.S. Edition of International Material, and on the thing it says translated by Jeremy Malul because I translated this book from French to English. For those of you who don't know, the Eisners are pretty much the most prestigious award in the comic book industry. They started in 1988, and they cover 31 different categories of awards for comics of different kinds and from different places. The key is that all of these comics had to have been published in the United States over the previous year. So in this case, back in 2018. The awards are named the Eisners in honor of Will Eisner, an incredible comic artist and pioneer of the comic medium who also created the comic book character The Spirit, which some of you might know about. They're awarded every year at Comic-Con, and I've known about them for as long as I've been pursuing a professional career in comics. So hearing the news was kind of crazy because I wasn't anticipating it at all. In fact, I was packing for a trip Friday morning when my friend messaged me and gave me the news, and this was my reaction. So I'm getting ready to leave for the weekend right now, and clearly I'm still not dressed or anything. And this morning now, I just found out I've been nominated for an Eisner, my first Eisner, for my work as a translator on this book, Heracles. What? So yeah, I've kind of been riding that high ever since for the last week or so. It's still pretty crazy. Translating has become my main source of income now. It's the main way I make a living. It's something that's really cool that I enjoy getting to do. I like to joke and say that I get paid to read comics for a living, which is kind of true, but there's a little bit more work that happens after I read the comic book. And I don't know if I'll win, but it's awesome just to get nominated. It's awesome to get that validation that, you know, the work I'm doing is good and people are receiving it well, especially in, you know, contrast to or in addition to talking about my first published piece of writing. Like, it's pretty crazy to talk about, hey, this is my first time being published as a writer, and at the same time, hey, I'm being nominated for an Eisner for a different segment of work that I'm doing. Since I started translating comics, I've translated about 60 books, maybe a bit over that, most of which I don't think have come out yet. And, you know, I really enjoy the books that I get to work on. I get to work on some really fun, really cool projects, including this series, which I've actually translated more of. Translating is kind of a line of work that I fell into. I didn't expect it to be something that would be my career in a lot of ways. And the way that it's grown has been, and it's just kind of, I think I'm as surprised as anybody else might be to see the way that it's played a part in my career and in my day-to-day, and how much more time I've been able to dedicate to it, put into it, and how rewarding it's really been. I think the fact that I'm a writer as well, separately, gives me a cool perspective into translating, because I realize that it's so much about translating the original creator's vision. And of course, with this award, I'm not really taking all the credit. There's Edouard Kuhl, who is the creator of this book, who took the myth of Heracles and reimagined it in this really cool, really badass way. It's a very unique take on the Heracles myth. It makes him a lot more rough around the edges, a lot more hard-headed. He's got a kind of Hellboy-ish quality to him. I also feel like the world and a lot of the conflict has a Samurai Jack kind of feeling to it, which I really enjoy, and I'm a big fan of Samurai Jack. But the book is funny, it's dark, it's tragic, and it's got some pretty cool, pretty intense action in there. So obviously, if Edwald hadn't even written the book, I wouldn't have gotten to translate it, and I wouldn't have been nominated for the Eisner as part of this book's nomination. And there's, Magnetic Press and Lionforge, who published this book and put together such a gorgeous edition of it. In fact, if it weren't for Mike Kennedy, the creative director, publisher, I don't remember his official title, at Magnetic, I probably wouldn't even be translating at all. So, this is definitely not something that I've done alone, and I'm talking like I won the award, but hopefully this just shows that win or lose, I'm just so excited to have been nominated, and it's just super cool. It makes me feel very legitimate. It's helping me at least temporarily overcome that feeling of imposter syndrome that I think all artists sometimes get. If you're interested in mythology, or if you want to see a totally different take on this story, I highly recommend that you go and check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description below. So yeah, I'm glad that this happened. It's really cool. I'm glad that I'm getting to document it. This kind of stuff, the highs and lows, is exactly why I wanted to start this series storyline, so that I could track and have a living record of my creative journey and the progress that I make. Obviously, this is just one chapter in the adventure, one chapter in the story, but it's a really nice one. So if you've been following along, if you are following along now watching this video, thank you for watching. I make a new video about nerdy things, imaginary things, every single Friday, so subscribe and keep up with the journey. I'll see you next week.